So I was asked for advice this week from a broker that works with us on the best advice for handling a listing appointment for a 45 million dirham villa that he's been invited to go out and see and to meet the client and present to them why they should employ this particular broker to represent the sale of their asset. And I want to share with you exact same advice that I gave him. Now, I believe most brokers do listing appointments incorrectly or ineffectively. Traditionally, what happens is these brokers go around, sit down, meet with a client at the property, and just say, oh, we're good at this, but don't really have an actual marketing strategy or an actual plan. And so one of my favorite philosophies, or the kind of key philosophy that I have when it comes to sales, is to always lead with value. And I'm a strategy guy. And I think if you have a clear strategy to get the best possible outcome for a client, and you can clearly present and articulate what that strategy is, immediately you're outcompeting any of the brokers you're going up against that are just saying, we're good at this, we're good at this. And so the main kind of overarching framework for how I handle a listing appointment is I want to go there and I want to educate the client and show them exactly what the perfect marketing plan and the perfect strategy would look like for them to get whatever desired outcome they want. And then it's up for them to decide whether or not they want me to be the broker that executes that marketing plan. When you follow that process properly, what happens is the client is so impressed with the value that you've provided and so grateful for the value that you've provided and how clearly you've educated them and made it clear as day for them on what that perfect strategy is, they end up just wanting to work with you. And so one of the first things I do going into a listing appointment, and by the way, a listing appointment for me, it's a minimum 2-hour conversation to do this properly. And so I won't go into the finer details about what you need to do before the listing appointment, how to handle the first few minutes, but I want to share with you the kind of how I tackle the initial conversation. And so one of the first points that I want to make to the client is that I have a strategy. It's a proven strategy. And once you've done this strategy I'm about to share with you and you have case studies and success stories, you can show how this is a proven process because you've done it time and time again. But the first thing we want to do is we want to establish what is the desired outcome that we're trying to achieve. Now, of course, you want to ask a lot of these open questions during the discovery phase to understand what are the pain points of the client, what is it they're looking for in a broker, what do they believe needs to happen in order to get them a result. But you want to find out what is the desired result that they want. And most often, it's they want to get the best possible price. And so when we identify that their outcome is they want to get the best possible price, not only want to sell the asset, they want to get the best possible price, I always ask them this question. The question I always like to ask every seller on a listing appointment is, have you ever paid more for something than you originally wanted to do? And oftentimes, if they think, they say yes. And I ask them to explain to me what that example was. And sometimes they say they were bidding on eBay and got caught up in the emotions and ended up bidding for something. They were buying a car at an auction, a property at an auction. And the point that I'm trying to make by asking them that question is that the reason they pay more for something than they originally intended to is because there was a competitive environment. There was real urgency, real scarcity, and that scarcity was created by the fact that they were competing with others. And so the main objective that I'm saying to the client we're trying to achieve is we want to create that competitive tension, because finding a buyer or getting an offer on a property is one thing. Finding the buyer that's willing to pay more than anybody else is another thing. And then being able to extract the highest possible price out of that buyer that's willing to pay more than anybody else is when you become a true expert and a true master at the negotiation game and at the marketing game of selling property. And that is what a client should be paying you for, because anyone can get offers, really, if they do this properly. And so once we've established the goal is we want to create this competitive environment, we want to create this competitive tension between buyers. It's like, well, all well and good, how do we do that? Because the client might be saying, well, my property's been on the market with other brokers for the last 6 months, the last 12 months, and we've had one viewing every few months. And so the first thing we have to do is break down that in order to get a property sold for the best possible price, it's a function of getting two things right. First thing we have to get right is the pricing strategy. The second thing we have to get right is the marketing strategy. And I always start with the marketing strategy first. And so when it comes to the marketing strategy is made up of the presentation of the property. How is it presented in person? Does it need staging? Does it need landscaping? Does it need some cosmetic work? It's the presentation of how it's presented in the marketing materials. So professional photography, professional videography, floor plans. And then the third element of marketing strategy is the distribution strategy. Because we can get the property looking beautiful with the landscape and with the cosmetic work, with the staging. We can present it in the best possible light with the best photography, the best videography, etc. But if we're not getting it under the eyeballs of the right buyers through distribution, then we still haven't done enough. So we have to get all three things right. And when it comes to distribution, that is when you want to show them again what that clear strategy is, whether it's a paid social media campaign, a targeted campaign, whether it's doing influencer posts, walkthroughs, if it's a video tour on a super high-end property. In the UK or Europe, you can do things like direct mail campaigns. There's a whole host of things you can do for the distribution of the marketing assets that you've created. And so you have to get the marketing right. Because if you get the pricing right, you can price it as cheap as possible. But if you don't promote it, no one's going to know it's for sale and no one's going to know it's available. You can get the pricing right, but if the marketing is wrong, well, then you're not going to get the buyers through the door, or they're not going to see that it's available. So you have to get both things right. In terms of getting the pricing strategy right, this is the key. The first thing you need to actually know about a listing appointment is it is not a valuation. You have to ban the word valuation from your vocabulary. Your job as a real estate broker is not to go and do valuations. Valuations are for surveyors, valuations are for banks. Now, a client might want to understand or get an indication of the value of their home, but again, this is where you have to educate them. They need to understand that the value of the property is worth different amounts to different buyers. Therefore, market value is a range. To the investor buyer who needs to achieve a certain yield and wants to spend X amount of money on the property, and it formulates his offer based of a spreadsheet, the property is going to be worth a different amount to the family that are buying it because it's south facing with the sun and it's the view that they want and the door number is their lucky number and it's in the specific school catchment area and it is on the same road as their close friends, whatever. They'll likely pay more. So market value is a range. And I always advise my clients on a listing appointment is be very careful of any brokers that come round and tell you your property is worth X, because nobody knows. Now we can look at indicators, and if you've done the research, which you have to do going into a listing appointment around the comparable sales, what's sold at what square foot, how does it compare, how much was a property, how much did they pay for the property, and how much has it increased since, all of these different indicators to establish a range. We can come to a conclusion. And again, this is a whole other training video, but when you go through understanding the market value range with a client, it's just something that has to be done together. What you don't want to do is say, I think your property is worth X to X, because it creates this almost like they might disagree with you. The masterful way to do it is you go through the evidence with them and you come to a conclusion together. So I'm saying, hey, this property down the road, 4 doors down, was slightly bigger than yours and it sold at this price. How do you think it compares to yours? This property 4 doors down that sold in November 3 years ago, how do you think this one compares to yours? It was a little bit bigger. Now there is an element of you kind of putting words in their mouth, but if you do it masterfully and you go through enough compelling evidence, eventually they get to a point where it's like the writing's on the wall. And they even say, before you have to say it, said, oh, so the evidence suggests market value in the range of X. And that is a dialogue you want to use. You do not want to say, I think your property is worth X. It's the evidence suggests it's worth X. You're placing the responsibility on the evidence. So they're not disagreeing with you, they're disagreeing with the evidence. And so if you do that massively together, there shouldn't be any disagreement on what you believe the market value range should be. Now, the second thing you then have to educate your client on when it comes to pricing strategy is you need to understand that market value and the pricing strategy are not the same thing. Rookie brokers will look at what we think the market value is, and they'll just say, well, if we think it's worth 20 million dirhams, we'll put it on the market for 20 million dirhams. But again, that's not a strategy. If you believe the property is worth 20 million dirhams, you then need to go through the various different pricing strategies and advise the client on what the best possible strategy is going to be. Now, I want to bring you back to the main objective of this listing appointment and the marketing strategy of the property is we want to achieve this competitive environment, this competitive tension amongst buyers. Because when you have competition amongst buyers, that's when you as the broker and your client, the seller, have the upper hand in the negotiation. You have all of the leverage in the negotiation. If a property's been sat on the market for months and there's one viewing every couple of weeks and the buyer can see that it's sat on the market for a while, they have all the power in the negotiation. So when it comes to pricing strategy, this is where the magic happens. If we can get the marketing plan right, the pricing strategy, we need to be pricing the property so attractively that when buyers see it, they think it's too good to be true. And the phone starts blowing up. Now, you've got to stay with me here. And what I say to the client, in fact, I run through what I call the pricing pyramid with them. So I have a notepad with me and a pen, and I draw this pyramid. I say there's 3 different ways we can price the property. We've established market value for this property to be 20 million dirhams. Now, one option, and this is when I draw at the very top of the pyramid, just one little stick man inside, is we can price the property 10% above market value with the view that people can come along and make an offer and we can negotiate. The problem with that, and this is why I draw the one stick man, is when you price the property high, we're then competing with all other properties that are bigger and better than yours. And so actually the property looks less attractive, you get less interest, you might get an offer, and when the offer comes in, it's the only offer you've got, and the offer is going to be on or really below market value. You've got no leverage in the negotiation, you end up just taking less anyway. And they're like, okay. And you say option 2 is we can price the property on or around market value. If we think it's in the region of 20 million dirham, then we can price the property at a guide price of 20 million dirham. Like, okay, that sounds fair. It's like, we will get some interest and some viewings, but we might not get that competition. We might just have one buyer that comes through and makes an offer, maybe 2. So if we really want to create a competitive environment, we need to be pricing the property 10 to 15% below market value. And this is when the client hesitates. You can hear them take a breath, but this again is where masterfully you have to kind of guide them through the process and overcome these objections. And I've had this conversation hundreds of times. And I've had clients, I'll go into a listing appointment and they'll tell me categorically, Tyler, I am never reducing the price of my property. 2 hours later, I've got them to agree to reduce their property by 10 to 20% because of what I'm about to take you guys through. And so when you pull the price down 10 to 15%, the asking price, what happens is buyers see it and think it's too good to be true. And they want to come and view it. Now, that's great having interest. Where we really have to be careful or really have to be strategic is we want to consolidate that interest. And so what we want to do is have an open house. Because with an open house, there's a wrong way to do it and there's a right way to do it. The wrong way to do an open house is just stick the property on the property portals, put in the description that open house this time, this date, and hope people call up and book in. The right way to do it is we do the full marketing campaign. Nobody views the property until the Saturday, the Sunday at 12 p.m. that the open house starts. Now, there's a number of benefits of an open house. First benefit is you've only got to prepare the property for one day. So you can have, if it's a high-end property, a DJ there playing music, and music creates emotion. You can have property smelling amazing. You can have it staged for that particular day. You can do lots of different things. The biggest benefit of an open house is all of the interest is there at the same time. Now, you might want to coordinate it where you do viewings in chunks, but I've always just preferred all buyers to arrive pretty much around the same time. And it is a bit of a frenzy, and you are going to need some support from some team members if it's done properly. But when you have that much interest in the property, you've got to understand the psychology of buyers. And think of your own buying psychology. People like to buy things that other people want. That's what hype is. When there's a new fashion thing that's fashionable, it's fashionable because everyone else wants it, everyone else is wearing it. And so psychologically, when other people at an open house see there's lots of other interest, that alone makes the property more attractive to them. And then On top of that, when they're at an open house and they see all these other people that are interested, they've seen evidence with their own eyes that there's lots of other interest, which immediately gives you all the upper hand in the negotiation. And so when that buyer says to you, hey, Tyler, I'm interested, where does my offer need to be? You can say, well, look, we're asking offers over 18 million, offers over 17 million, but based on the level of interest and the conversations I'm having today, your offer needs to be north of 20 million dirham. And they're like, okay, cool, let me think about it, let me come back to you. And so you've got the upper hand in the negotiation. The other thing that I tell to clients, because this is where I want to go through the objection handling of getting them to commit to this pricing strategy, is when buyers call up to book in for the open house. Now there's a number of questions that I like to take buyers through to qualify them. And again, masterful brokers, they don't ask questions like, what's your budget? How many bedrooms are you looking for? And it just sounds like a fucking interrogation. The questions you want to be asking are, for the perfect property, for the perfect investment, how much can you spend up to? That is a totally different question to what's your budget. If you ask someone, what's your budget? And for the perfect property, how much can you spend up to? You're going to get two totally different answers. The other question you want to ask is, describe to me, what does the perfect property look like for you? Or what does a perfect investment look like for you? Don't ask some questions like, how many bedrooms do you want? How much this do you want? Just open question, what does a perfect property look like for you? And they're going to list the things that are most important for them. After they're done listing those things, you then want to follow up that question and say, of those things you've just told me, which of those can you not compromise on? And then you've got their non-negotiables. So you found out exactly what their maximum budget is because you've asked them a loaded question for the perfect property, for the perfect investment. How much can you spend up to? What does the perfect one look like for you? And what can you not compromise on? You've got their non-negotiables. Other questions like, how are you financing the purchase and what steps have you taken so far? When you can ask these really nice open questions, these phone calls don't sound like an interrogation. They sound like a great conversation. But the point being is, at the end of that call, when I'm asking about their budget, and I'm asking what drew them to this property, what excites them about this property, what have they looked at so far, I'll just kindly let them know, say, hey, based on the level of interest we've had so far, although we're asking offers over 18 million, we're actually expecting offers to go far north of this. I just wanted to set your expectation. And so immediately you've seeded in their mind that there's lots of interest and setting their expectation on where the offers need to be. Now, if you've, of course, asked them for their budget, for the perfect property, how much can you spend up to? If they've said 18 million or 17 million, then you think, actually, they might not be qualified to come around and view this property. However, I would argue there's no such thing as a time waster in real estate. I ban the word time waster from anyone that works with me. A time waster is just someone that you have yet to find the opportunity in that lead, because there is an opportunity in every contact. When you have that belief system, you will find that opportunity. It might be a referral or whatever, but there's an opportunity in every contact. And so there's no such thing as a time waster. At an open house, you want as many people there as possible. Now you want to qualify them, you want to vet them. But if someone is there and maybe their budget is 17 million and you're trying to sell it for 20 million, because that's where the seller's expectation is, there's a couple things you need to bear in mind. The first thing you need to bear in mind is you just need one buyer that is willing to pay 20 million dirham or more. And that one buyer that's there, if they're at an open house with 20 other buyers, I don't know that those 20 other buyers can't afford 20 million. They don't know that the other buyer that is in the living room with them also looking at the property can only afford 17 million. The perception you're creating is that there's lots of interest. And so sometimes I've had open houses where there's 20 buyers and there's only one offer. And that one person that's offered, they're bidding against themselves. But because I've created this perception of lots of other interest, I have the upper hand in that negotiation. The second reason it won't be a waste of time for them to come is because when they're there, they might only offer 17 or 18 million, and that might be where your offers come in at. If you do a huge, extensive marketing campaign and you have people come through and you have 5 offers that are all less than what you were hoping for, what the seller was hoping for, what the seller wanted, because sellers can want whatever price they want. They can hide from reality, but you can't hide from the consequences of hiding from reality. And if the market's spoken and all the offers come in below what they were hoping to achieve, well, then the market has spoken and it's up to them to make a decision. And the dialogue I use or the question I ask these clients is, Once the market's spoken and I've given them confidence, we've done a very extensive marketing campaign and we've extracted the highest offer out of each of these buyers through my negotiation techniques, the only decision they have to make is, do they want to sell or do they want to stay? And that's it. And so just coming back to the objection handling this conversation around the pricing strategy as well, there's a couple key points I want to make to the client. The first point is that they are in full control at all times around what offers they say yes or no to. Your job and what you're telling them is, my job as a broker is to get you offers on the table and you can understand what the market is prepared to pay. Because right now we can make assessments or assumptions and come to conclusions of what we think is worth looking at the evidence. You can have an opinion on what you think it's worth. Broker A can have an opinion on what they think it's worth. Broker B over here can have an opinion on what they think it's worth. Ultimately, it's what is the market prepared to pay. I would rather bring you offers that we can reject than no offers at all. Because if we have offers on the table that you can reject, at least then you can have the confidence that you know what the property is worth and you can decide, do you want to sell or do you want to stay? What you don't want to do is sit on the market for a long time. You get more desperate as time goes on. Buyers see there's no other interest and they start making lowball offers. And they're in full control of what offers they say yes or no to. Only when you present an offer to that client, they can decide, do they want to sell it and move forward with the offer or do they want to stay? And finally, the other benefit of having this bulletproof marketing strategy, and like I say, this is normally a 2-hour conversation to do it extensively, sometimes longer, is at the end of the conversation, you can say to the client, you can close and you can say, look, are you happy with the marketing plan? And you're doing these micro closes along the way. So I believe if you have to close hard at the end of a listing appointment, it's because you've not done all the micro closes along the way. You have to close them on agreeing on the market value range, agreeing on pricing strategy, agreeing that the marketing plan you've presented is better than any the broker has presented, closing them on the belief systems that you're trying to instill into them on what the right way to do this is. When you get to the end and you ask them, have I earned the right to be the broker that executes this marketing plan for you? And they say yes, I will then be saying, well, look, there's just a couple conditions of doing this. If you would like me to represent you and execute this plan that I've shared with you. Condition number one is I need to be the exclusive agent. And there's a few very valid reasons why it's in your best interest, Mr. Client, that I am the exclusive agent. The main two reasons a client should give you exclusivity or why you need to educate a client on why they should give you exclusivity is, number one, when there are more than one brokers involved in the transaction, there becomes a conflict of interest. What I mean by that, my job as a broker is to act in the best interest of the client. And I want to be able to lay my head on my pillow at night, knowing that I have advised my client based on their interest, not mine, to get a commission. The problem with that is there are other brokers out there that unfortunately are running a little bit tight on cash and they've got rent to pay at the end of the month. And so if that broker knows that there is another broker, i.e. me, involved in that transaction, and that broker gets an offer on your property, that broker in the back of their mind, they might think, I think actually I could get a little bit more for this client if we waited out another couple of weeks and did a bit more marketing. But they've got their rent to pay at the end of each month. They're going to be telling the client, you need to take this offer. And so suddenly, when brokers know they're competing with other brokers, they start acting in their interest to get their commission rather than the best interest of the client. The second reason a client should give you exclusivity is that you want to be investing time and money and energy into a marketing plan. And so if you've actually presented a marketing strategy, an actual marketing strategy to the client, not just let's stick it on Property Finder and hope the phone rings and I'm good because I answer WhatsApps at 10 o'clock, an actual marketing strategy with clear deliverables, a clear marketing campaign, you want to be asking for a contribution towards the marketing from your client. Now, all of my clients for the last however many years have all paid a marketing contribution. They paid a contribution towards a marketing budget. They have paid upfront for me to market their home. And when you can show them where that money is going to be going, you can say, I'm willing to invest time and money and energy. You can ask for them, which all clients are happy to invest in the marketing of their home, by the way. And if you feel like they don't, that's just because you don't have the right dialogue in the scripts and understand how to present the value. But when they give you an actual marketing budget, which is a whole other video that I can do on how to get a marketing contribution, a marketing budget from a client or listing appointment. you then actually have a budget to invest in the marketing of the property, which is also a budget to invest in the marketing of yourself. Because when you market the property and you're the agent, you're going to have a lot more eyeballs on you as well. So you want to get exclusivity. You want to be pushing for a contribution towards the marketing. Hopefully that was valuable. So much more I can cover. But if you guys subscribe, I'm going to be sharing more. And feel free to ask me any more questions on my Work with Tyler Instagram, which is linked in the description of this video.